That's sad.
Oh shoot! Hey folks, it is February the 2nd, and so today we're going to go over a little. We're going to go over in a little bit more detail on some of the things that we discussed the past couple of weeks. But I'm also going to give a broad overview of. Once again, we're going to review the principles of U.S. government. And I'm going to briefly go over parts of the Constitution and linking. But after this, we're going to go over these things in more detail, specifically Constitution, Bill of Rights, the other amendments following it, and then, of course, the election process, lawmaking process, the power of the federal government. And then we're going to move on to the states, and then the local governments, and things like that. So, real quick though, I forgot. I need to post this on the Google Classroom because I don't know. It'd be nice if I could have a little screen of I don't know. Well, actually, I don't know. Really, it'd be better if I just kind of lectured with this as my screen. I need to start doing that. But this Chromebook stinks. It's not really able to stream well and have PowerPoint up at the same time.
Hi, yesterday, Miss Cook was streaming in our class and doing stuff on a Google Doc. And she was freaking out because it kept
Stuttering.
She typed
Yeah.
and then 10 things would just pop up.
I mean, there's going to be that lag delay, but yeah, I mean, with these Chromebooks, these are these things are worse than any smartphone on the market, really. I mean, they're just they're bare essentials.
Mass produced for school, so they're just not the quality isn't that great.
Pretty much. And I mean, you can get pretty good Chromebooks, but I don't know why you would, because they can't use a lot of programs. I mean, really, you can get the best processor, the best memory, and all this other stuff. But what's the point?
Limited.
Chrome doesn't. Yeah, Chrome can't handle a lot of different things.
Unless you put it on Linux.
Well, yeah, you can do that, but that's a major workaround. And
that's why I just have a Acer Inspire.
see, I'll just title it Notes. And not everybody likes Linux. I mean, I don't know. I've never used it myself, but
It does sound interesting to work around. Play around with that.
that's pretty cool. I've been messing around with Python for a long time. Then I was like, what am I doing? What's the point of this? It's because it I don't know. So
It's so fun.
yeah, but I'm trying to move into JavaScript now because I think I could do more of what I actually want to do with Java than I can with Python. All right. So, hear that little thing? All right. So I posted the notes online, and it's called Notes.
Thank you.
Indeed. It's on the Google Classroom, sir, under Notes. All right. So, yeah, I was thinking about it. I was like, I used to have some slides where I had a little bit more information about some of these folks we talked about as far as influencing our government. So the thing is about this, if you see something, I would turn back to the notes that we had on some of these people. And if you see something you think you should add to that, just go ahead and add it. If not, don't worry about it. So once again, Thomas Hobbes, he wrote a book called The Leviathan. Look, the Leviathan is huge. It is a Leviathan of a book. It is. So Hobbes is known as as far as modern English political theorist, he's the first really big one we talk about. And so he wrote this book as kind of a defense of a really strong absolute monarch, because he saw that humanity at its base was this very destructive force where people without rules or rulership were self-destructive. They were harmful to others, more wicked than nature in many ways. Human nature is built on self-interest, which is the root of all social conflict. So self-interest can have to do with what your wants and desires. I want money, so you might do bad things for the money. You have different kinds of hungers and appetites, and you might use other people in a wicked way. And so he saw that the only way that to control these vices was to have a ruler that was strong enough to control the people, sometimes through fear and authority, in order to keep them from harming one another. He did, however, believe in natural rights such as freedom and equality, but that people give up freedom and equality in exchange for order and security. So you have to obey. You have no right to revolt. Because, of course, part of this also has to do with the thing, like it was like a Davidic kingship, right? So it was like a divinely inspired king. So you have no right to like go against what's been laid down by God. And so, yeah, serious stuff, very dour. Gosh, I forgot the quote. It's like something like, it's like he believed life was just nasty, brutish, and short was what he wrote.
Facts.
And so, yeah, not cheerful, not sunshines and hippie flowers. He was.
I don't see that earlier.
Sorry to hear that. So yeah, remember we talked a bit about him. All right, so somebody we're going to read from once, and we talked about him a bit, is John Locke. Unlike Hobbes, Locke believed that people could be selfish, but didn't have to be selfish. We have self-advocacy, or free will. Our nature is to be good. We just make mistakes along the way, and to be good doesn't mean that necessarily that you're always kind and cheerful. What it means is that just because you're trying to take care of your self-interest doesn't mean that it's a zero-sum game. You have to hurt others to do well.
This makes you think of the argument between nature versus nurture. Like this is John Locke argues for nature, while Thomas Hobbes argues for nurture.
Well, no, because actually John Locke wrote on education. He was also a big writer on education, and he came up with something called the tabula rasa, a blank slate theory. He believed that essentially all human beings were born with a blank slate. There was no nature. You're just don't know anything. And everything you learn is from your parents and society around you. And so he believed that you could take any baby from any part of the world, they're all born equally, and as long as you educate them the exact same way, they'll turn out to be basically the same person. Yeah, we know it's wrong, but he believed it. Yeah. So for our purposes, he wrote, especially his second treaty on government was very important. We're going to read that in class later in the year. He preferred, his preferred government was a constitutional monarchy. Property people could have the right to vote, because people who owned property had skin in the game. People who own property want the places around them to be prosperous and well-governed and free. People who don't own property don't really care. So
I think it should still be like that.
good luck. All right, so natural rights, life, liberty, equality, and property. And these things are inalienable. Your government has no right to take away any of these things from you. He also believed in social contract. That's like Hobbes, where we all have an unlimited amount of freedoms, but we give up some of those freedoms, such as, the right to kill your neighbor, for safety so that your neighbor doesn't kill you. That sounds nice. Yeah. So I give up my right to kill you if you give up your right to kill me, okay? And to steal your stuff.
I thought because you already killed them, but then they're gonna come back.
No. It's like,
I was thinking more
it's like, now that I did you harm, you may not rise as a zombie and do me harm. So no, it's not that.
I was on page two.
All right. Because it already works out like that. All right, so
You wrote down the entire thing.
no, you don't have to write down that. I mean, like I said, you already wrote a bit on them. I'm just going a bit over it.
Every time, dude. Like every
This is,
time.
I'm going back over it again with the set I meant to show you, but I couldn't find. I haven't found it. So, all right. So, government can only govern with the consent of the governed. People must agree on who their rulers will be. Government is limited. People have the right to revolt against bad government. And he doesn't say that lightly. Like, he says you have to have a really good reason to do it. But he also he writes the Second Treaty of Government on the idea that if your government is doing things that it really shouldn't, you might not revolt against it, but you don't have to really listen to them. Or if a government comes in and takes over your government, that's not a legitimate government. And he says there's rules to war that must be followed. Like, you can't go in, like he follows basically Augustine of Hippo's idea of Christian just war doctrine, where you can't just go to war willy-nilly. If you go to war, it must be in defense of yourself or your friends. And when you go to war, you should only try your best, even though it's not possible, to do more harm than you have to. So like if neighborhood country comes in and destroys one of your villages, you have the right to go in and beat them up and make them at least pay restitution for the loss of that village. Maybe not destroy another village because that doesn't get you anywhere, but at least get them to pay it, right? So he was all about just war. So Charles Montesquieu, remember we talked a bit about him. He wrote something called The Spirit of Laws. His preferred government was a republic. These French philosophe guys were really, really, really into ancient Rome and Greece. They really believed, because they lived under like a very strict monarchy. And so they looked to the past for like a way to go. Yeah.
Question. Why is it when we talk about like the French, so like they're like doomed, like the only thing they fear is you starts flying whenever they try to kill a Frenchman, but whenever it comes to war, they're just
Well, not under. I
French are
mean,
weird. They're so weird, dude.
well, I mean, well, I don't know if that's necessarily fair because I don't think it's particularly fair because the French people we're talking about then are different than the French people we'll talk about later. Because if you're talking about the 20th century, we're not talking about people with these ideas. If you're talking about, however, like say, you know, like around 1800, you know, you had Napoleon going around taking over like that part of the world. If you talk about like the early Franks, like Charlemagne, he took over essentially everything he knew of, basically. So I think it just depends on what time period. But yeah, like 20th century France, no. I mean, sorry. Yeah, they kept overestimating themselves and underestimating the new kid on the block, Germany, and it didn't work out well. So
Don't do that. Yeah.
yeah, they thought the new kid in town was like pretty weak, but it turns out.
Was an anime person.
Right.
Protagonist powers.
So he believed that people are often timid and fearful. However, if we unite, we can become a stronger force. The stronger society then tends to war on the weaker groups. And so that's actually something that's actually a lot of something that political theorists uphold today is the idea that that's one of the negative natures of democracy, is that kind of like with herd animals, right? Like a herd animal is very scared when it's on its own and when it's away from a herd. But whenever it's together, it blends in and it's no longer an individual. It's basically like a giant organism. Well, with democracies, what democracies tend to do is they tend to look for which part of the democracy stands out, which one's different, which person is not part of the herd. And then it makes them into an outsider, and it often persecutes them. And you could say that the same might happen for nations. Often stronger nations eventually find an excuse to get rid of their weaker neighbors. It happens. No. Function of government is to maintain law and order, protect political liberty and individuals' property. Abuse of power by government is avoided by separation of powers and checks and balances. Remember, we talked about that when we brought him up earlier. So, maintain law and order, protect political liberty and individuals' property. So once again, we find that these ideas, they help form America. And if you remember in economics, we read articles where the economist said, like going back to Hayek, your individual liberty is the same as your property, your economic liberty. You can't separate the two. If you're not free economically, you really don't have the other rights you think you have. Yeah. And so these guys were saying something similar. You don't have political freedom if you don't have property freedom. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you see, like we were talking in our warm-up, if you have a lot of property, you have more legal protection. And you get to play games that other people don't get to play. Like we're talking about with Wall Street. Speaking of, I gotta text about that.
You really like it?
Yeah.
But you played Reach.
Dude, Reach.
All right, next one.
That's more character.
No.
Say what? Okay. You're not doing that in class, are you?
No.
Okay, good. All right. So we didn't talk about this guy, right? So this guy's a contemporary of the American and the French Revolution. So no, not the French Revolution. All right. So David Hume. I'm sorry, I got to mix up with somebody else. I got to mix up. So David Hume. He's going to be a British philosopher, and he's going to write a treatise of human nature. Once again, his preferred government is republic. And he said, man is not entirely self-serving. We seek balance. People are part of a community, and people try to see that their community thrives. That's a very natural thing. Natural rights, free speech is essential. And so, and when you think about it, you can't have a functioning republic, a representative government, if you're not able to have free speech. And free speech is also free ideas, because how you speak and what you speak has to do with how you can think. And if you restrict one, you restrict the other. And he said a written constitution is needed to prevent bad government. So David Hume, I got to mix up with
The other thing.
No,
You know the thing.
So,
The thing that does.
but the reason I'm bringing these guys up is because they have a lot to do with what the founders were thinking. All right, Adam Smith. And so y'all read some of Adam Smith, remember? Like he was like one of the first things I had y'all read. And so Adam Smith is going to deeply influence our economic founders, especially people like Thomas Jefferson, very free market guy. And also to some extent to Alexander Hamilton, though he wanted a bit more economic control in some ways. They both actually did. Like one wanted to control the economy for agriculture, the other wanted to control the economy for more industry. But you're also going to see Adam Smith, though, he's going to, since he's essentially the inventor of what you might call capitalism, free market economy, he's going to also influence people who want to depose it later on, such as Charles Marx. So lay down the foundations for free market economy. If people are allowed to manage their own lives, they will not only be happier, but their employers, employees, and fellow workers will be happier as well. If you remember believing the invisible hand in economies, self-interest unintentionally promotes good society. So remember, if I take care of my things, if I do my job, you're going to pay me because my job somehow helps you. And then I'm going to pay you because you do something I want, So especially in a market economy, because in the market economy, everybody can get together, you can trade different things, and everybody specializes in the things they're best at doing. And you do the thing that you're best at if you're a sensible person, because you'll make the most money the most efficiently. And if everybody's making the most money as efficiently as possible,
Everything's good.
everything's at
Everybody's
fantastic.
good.
Everybody's good.
Instead of forcing things that maybe nobody really wants. Right?
No, what people.
So if y'all remember, we already talked about these. So I made this originally as a PowerPoint, so the transitions don't work. I'd have to go in and edit it all. So republicanism, the belief that government should be based on the consent of the people. People exercise their power by voting for political representatives. So you have a republic that represents you. It has aspects of a democracy, but it also has aspects of essentially, I guess like an oligarchy, or like a rule of the established elders. Limited government. All U.S. citizens, including the government, obey the law. Individual rights. Liberty guaranteed to U.S. citizens by Bill of Rights, inalienable, granted by higher power. Is that what?
What?
What's wrong, Reagan?
They're pretty similar.
Ronald Reagan.
That's wrong.
Like Ronald
Reagan, no. All right, checks and balances. Each branch of government to exercise checks or controls over the other to make sure that they're balanced out. The separation of powers. The division of basic government roles into branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Remember, this is just a review. Federalism, power of a government where power is shared among the central or federal government and states. And so, towards U.S. history, we've become more and more of a centrist government. And a centrist style government is where you have just one political head and they rule over the rest of the country. So that's been an aspect of American federal power throughout our history, as more and more of our government power centers towards Washington, D.C. All right, popular sovereignty, government which the people rule. Government only has power that we grant it. So they're not supposed to do things without our consent and without our say-so. Now, we don't have direct democracy where we vote on everything, but
That would be terrible.
it would be very different.
Did you see
I think that's it.
thing about how the Republicans have it, they put it on there, but the next time we vote in Texas, there's gonna be a article talking about Texas leaving the United States.
Oh, yeah, that's not the, that's,
Oh, yeah.
that's not the first time we've had it brought up. Yeah, I saw the day that bill got,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
House
like
bill
the
got
first,
introduced.
like, thing in the whole process of like Texas receding from the United States.
Oh, let's go.
Like,
Well,
sign or whatever.
Some people think
Voting yes.
we would be one of the one state that could probably do it, but the thing is, that's only, like, that would never happen.
Yeah.
We would be invaded.
America, who's talking y'all.
We'd be invaded. So
We'd be invaded.
we'd be invaded by other Americans. So, hey, folks, that's going to end our lecture for today. See you again on Thursday. We'll finish it up.
No.
Yeah, we'll go over some